record to the computer. And we are live and ready when you are ready to go, Matt.
Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
And I'm Mark Zockel. You're ready to clock in for some overtime talk? I got all kinds of horrible puns coming at you tonight about clockwork.
There we go. Well, tonight we are exploring the issue of teachers working beyond their contracted hours. And we are pleased to have our guest, Hope Kupari, joining us on this conversation as she is the expert in this
absolute
scenario.
Expert. She's shaking her head no, but what she really wants to do is shake her head yes, because she has done the work. She has put in the academic time to be the world's leading expert on certain Christian schools, administrators' insights into why they have the understanding of non-contractual hours, if that's what they call it. Some of them didn't call it that, as I remember. So, but Hope, why don't you go ahead and talk about yourself for a little bit? Go ahead, talk about yourself.
Yeah, so I am Hope, and I am a third and fourth grade teacher. I wear many hats in my school, but the last year I completed my master's program.
Woohoo!
And yes, hallelujah, it's over. No. Yeah, it was quite the journey, but to finish the program, we did this action research project, and so Dr. Zockel was my advisor, and we did some fun research. It was a good time.
It was. I enjoy more than any other class I get to be an adjunct for at Maranatha Baptist University, 515 research design, which leads students who theoretically have never actually conducted their own research as academic figures before, and then put themselves out there as, we are now citable critics of what's going on in the world. And 515 prepares them to do that, and then they do it in 600. And it's such a blessing to see students work through that. And I get excited about it because I can go and find secular viewpoints, anywhere about all of these same sort of opinions, topics, portions of education. But I so enjoy hearing from believers and well-trained, biblically minded people, administrators, teachers, looking to make oftentimes Christian education stronger. And that's Hope. And what she was looking to study, it was the simple research question for her study was one just that continued. Every time I came back to it, I was excited about it. And I didn't have to do research, which is great. I just get to read about it. So there is the statement of our background together. Hope, anything to add there besides I was probably a horrible teacher, but
I think it should be noted that our first phone call discussing this research, I definitely was crying while I was talking to you. Like,
oh, no.
I was so terrified and so scared that I was going to mess it up. Like, it was very intimidating, but we made it through by the end, and we had really made it.
But not only did she make it, but she made a very, it was very clearly, I would say the Holy Spirit, absolutely. The Holy Spirit nudged me to say, Hope, would you be willing to write about this? Would you be willing to perhaps make this into an article? And I don't remember quite how that conversation went, other than at some point you said, fine, we'll try it. Is that how it went? Is that how you remember
I was
going?
so done with this project. Like, by the time it was, I don't remember when it was, like April or something. I think I was like, I guess, like, I thought it was over with. I had submitted it. Like, I wanted it done, but it just keeps coming back.
I just want more of your time over this thing that you paid to write. So
yes.
Yeah. But
good times.
God is good, and Hope and I were able to collaborate and co-author a piece that the American Association of Christian Schools will be presenting in their trade journal, Lord willing, sometime in the upcoming school year. And we are pumped about that. And so that's what we want to talk about a lot tonight anyway. So there's the big introduction.
Well, I feel like kind of the third wheel here, because I was, I thankfully did not have Mark as a teacher, and unfortunately hadn't hoped as a student. But
Oh man.
but I guess just as we're getting into, Hope, what you have found when it comes to teachers working outside of contracted hours, what was the inspiration? What kind of led you into looking into this niche of teaching and education?
Yeah, so I teach at a small Christian school in Wisconsin, and as this is a Christian principles podcast, I'm sure many people listening to this can relate. Um, Working in a Christian school, you wear a lot of hats and there are a lot of responsibilities. I had had some not great bosses in my past, specifically a principal or two that was tough. And so I had this frustration, one may say bias, of this feeling of I feel like I'm working so much, and my principal doesn't get it. And I had had so many conversations with other colleagues of that, just this feeling of being overworked and burnt out. And yeah, so I just am starting my 6th year of teaching. So I'm definitely, I mean, I'm not a rookie anymore, I guess, but on the younger side when I go to like conventions and things, and all of these other teachers my age are just struggling with, wow, there's a lot. Teaching is a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot. And so there were a lot of different ideas I had for the action research, but this one definitely kind of hit home for me, I guess, and also seemed the most doable, as all I had to do was give out some surveys. So that's always a win too.
Yeah, Hope, I do remember very specifically some of that early bias when you were talking about this as a student. I don't remember, and I hate to think that you cried at any point in this, but I readily understand, and I'm sure you aren't the first or the last, because graduate work is graduate work. It's not simple, especially when you are so stressed outside of that work. But God is good and gives us the strength, and we praise His name for it. But I do remember some of that bias and talking to you about that bias. So at some point tonight, I really want to make sure we go back and see where that bias either held up or didn't held up or was changed, because that was something we talked about again even later on. I do remember that. So
Oh,
speaking,
totally. It was crazy how I had this thought in my head of where this research was probably going to go. And I was like, I'm going to guard myself against bias and try to make it as objective as possible to prove that I'm right. And yeah, the research it speaks for itself.
well, let me ask you this. Uh, I'm too I'm too close to this study. So talk to me like I'm five. Walk me through your methodology for the study that you did. Okay, how did you go about this work?
Yeah, so we started out with just some surveys and we wanted to make sure we are getting both perspectives, right? We didn't want to just talk to teachers. We didn't want to just talk to principals. And I guess kind of the goal was that comparison of, are these two entities on the same page as to how much work is being done outside of contract hours, in quotes, I guess, of what is expected of teachers typically. And so we sent out, a survey first to administrators to just make sure that it was okay that we contacted their teachers and stuff. And then I believe, I'm like, ooh, I got to remember back to then, but we sent out one at the beginning that asked the administrators what they kind of predicted or some of that kind of stuff. And then we asked the teachers, okay, now in reality, how much have you worked in the past week? Or I'm trying to remember if it was per week or if it was by the average. See, I don't really totally remember, but a lot of it was just that comparison between the surveys of what is an administrator thinking is happening, and then the teacher in reality, what is actually, how many hours are being worked.
Absolutely. Okay, so how did you go about collecting? Pause, start over. I'm going to ask you what you just said, so I shouldn't do that.
I guess my question is like, how easy was it to collect that data? Were you getting good feedback from that?
Ask that formally, and we'll start there, Matt. The three,
Yeah.
two, one.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. So what were the results? Not necessarily the data, but as far as the feedback of those surveys, were you getting a good response from administrators, teachers, when it comes to collecting that? Were you able to get a decent reaction to those surveys?
Yeah, and I think that was some of my hesitancy of, oh, I want this to be this humongous study that I study all of these different schools. And really, we tried to narrow it down to Christian schools international accredited schools in Wisconsin. So it was a small pool that we asked, and I think it ended up being 4 different schools that we attempted to survey, and then one did not get permission for various reasons. So yeah, it was 3 schools that participated in the study, and not every teacher responded to the survey because it's all volunteer. I can't force anyone to do it. So that also was one of my variables that I was like, oh shoot, that's a bummer, because if I could have gotten every teacher's feedback, I think that would have helped it to be even a better study. But with the teachers that did respond, I have it pulled up here. It looks like for the most part, those teachers, and I just surveyed elementary teachers. So again, this could be different for middle school teachers, high school teachers, specials, all of those different things. There's so many different places you could take this, but for elementary teachers, they responded that they, on average, outside of their contract hours, spent between 5.5 and 7 hours. So most of them fell between that window. So yeah, that was really interesting. We determined, I think every teacher did say that they had some sort of work outside of contract hours, which most people know that, but it was good to just say, okay, yeah, we surveyed these people, and truly they are working outside of contract hours quite a bit.
It was good that we did come down to that you came down to that narrow focus. And we talk about this a lot in even our show. Matt and I talk about, we can't talk about everything. We've got to talk about the smallest bit of minutia about something, because we are not going to be in a position to be able to actually gain such granular knowledge about such a wide swath of whatever it happens to be. And so it's not a mark of shame, but rather a mark of fame that you would come up with the organization that you did with a representative sample from that organization willing to talk to you. So again, I celebrate that in you, Hope, and what it is that you found, and how you went about
it. And even before we continue, because we're going to get into some of these details, I'm having an interesting, this is one of the first times as an episode where I'm hosting, but at the same time, I kind of feel like I'm a listener at the same time, which is neat. I like it. But I'm wondering now, of our school leaders that are listening into the podcast, what their thoughts are when it comes to teachers working beyond contracted hours. Or what are our expectations going into this, without looking at the actual data and the research? Because I know, looking at the research that you found, it may not be all that you think it is. So be thinking about that. Be sharing your comments as you guys are listening, like me, as you think of how our teachers are doing in this area.
I'd even say hit pause right now and actually pick a teacher in your mind. Maybe pick 2 or 3 teachers, because we got the ones that we know they're working all the time, and the ones we think are barely working. But pick a couple teachers in your mind and actually think about, okay, what would be the quote unquote non-contracted hours? Now, one thing I want to ask here, Hope, before we keep going, and this wasn't something we came up against we can't talk about in our show notes, but did you receive any kind of response from an administrator that was, well, technically there is no such thing as a non-contracted hour?
There was, I know for sure one administrator did say kind of, and so then we kind of defined it as contract hour the school day, right? I mean, in my contract, and that was the interesting part of this, is my school is very closely related to the schools that I studied. So we do all professional development together. I was very familiar with their schools. And so with that background knowledge, I knew what my school did. And we have, you have to be there at 7:30 and you may leave at 3:30. Like, those are your contract hours. But it was interesting how different administrators either thought I just on social media, you have so many different, like I go on Instagram for 5 seconds and it's some teacher talking about how their goal for the month is to leave at contract hours. Like it's kind of this big idea of, teachers shouldn't have to work outside of, the school day. And it's like, yeah, that'd be nice, but that's not reality, especially in a small Christian school. If like I teach PE, I teach art, like I think this year I have 1 hour of prep a week. Like there are certain sacrifices that you make when you are becoming a teacher, and a lot of that is, yeah, a lot of evenings or weekends. That means you might have some grading to do, or you might have some lesson prepping that you need to do that you didn't get inside the prep time provided.
Yeah, I can even say back when I was student teaching in the public school, which was my first interaction with public school, being in Christian education all my life, there was a big push of, when you leave, you don't do anything with school. You go home and you put your feet up, or you do other things that need to get accomplished. And I really loved a statement one teacher made to me. They don't pay us enough to work at home, and all the while I'm thinking, in Christian education, I'm not going to be making what you're making. And at the same time, if we were to even pull this over into ministry in the sense of pastoral ministry, can you say, what would a pastor's uh, sermons begin looking like if he only worked in church hours? It doesn't quite work that way. So I think we tend to think that way in ministry, of it, where administrators might think, yes, we pay them a salary and we have expectations of being on campus between this time and this time, but we're paying them to do the job as best they possibly can, and it's not going to be accomplished within those times when you have prep and everything else on top of it.
We've talked a lot about the build up to this and how you went about your study and who you reached out to and whatnot. But let's actually get down to the data. Okay,
Yeah.
let's do it. Let's talk about it. So tell us, and I pulled up here on the shared screen, we have what the actual alignment of was between the administrator and the teacher perspectives. So walk us through that. Hope.
Yeah, so it was so interesting. I still can't get over it. So on average, like I said, the teachers were in between this 5 hours and 7 hours per week that they're working outside of that contract hours or school days. And then every single administrator overestimated that average. So there were 3 schools surveyed, right? And two of the administrators both said, I think that my teachers on average are working more than 10 hours. And then one said, average of 10 hours. So to me, it was just so, like I said, I came in with a very strong bias. I mean, probably not as strong as I even realized, that administrators don't understand. They don't get, all of the things that us teachers have to go through and all these different tasks. And yeah, sometimes they don't. But these three, they know there's a lot that they're asking their teachers. But they're kind of stuck because at the end of the day, we all care about the kids. We want to do our best job in the classroom, and most of us can acknowledge it takes a lot of time. So yeah, it was just so interesting how each administrator significantly overestimated the average that their elementary teachers were working.
Now, when I see that, I immediately think, okay, are they just trying to cover? Are they just trying? Or did you? I mean, as you walk away, Matt, when you first saw this, did you get that same feeling? What were your thoughts, Matt?
Well, my first reaction when if you would have sent the survey to me as an administrator who's entering his 7th year of administrating, of how many hours on average do my teachers work outside of school hours, I probably would be in this camp of overestimating as well, because I see just not only the work that our teachers are doing, which clearly they don't have the prep time to do in the school day, but also they're in the building like well beyond clock hours, and I can physically see them working on things. So it is interesting just from an administrative perspective of, maybe I assume teachers are working more hours outside of school than they actually are, because I know that's where their heart is, and I know that's what sometimes might be necessary to accomplish the things that they're accomplishing.
Hope, how about you? Did you have maybe some of that same reaction of, oh, they're just covering for themselves, or what did you think?
A little bit. I mean, I think it's hard not to think, oh, they don't want to look like they're jerks. So
Yeah,
they're gonna
yeah,
make sure that they show that they understand. But I do know some of them personally, and I do know,
exactly.
like I know that they know.
Yeah. And they're Christian school educators, so we didn't come into this, you didn't come into this study thinking they were gonna lie to you. And the
Right.
fact that the three of them, without contacting each other, we're assuming, came up with pretty similar numbers, again, furthers the point. So
Hmm.
But I guess the further uh, reality, though, is if our administrators are overestimating how much time their teachers are working, and yet the teachers are still thinking the administrator has no idea how much I'm actually working, or possibly like I'm working a lot more than they think, which is wrong. Um, then that's telling me that there's a communication breakdown
yeah,
between the
exactly.
administrator and the teachers.
Mhm. So what do you think that communication breakdown, reveals? Hope, what do you respond to what Matt just,
Yeah.
do you agree?
Yeah, I think a lot of, I mean, in my vast experience of 5 years,
Mm,
um,
vast, huge.
so vast. I think from my experience, it's not necessarily like my administrator doesn't understand. It's more this, there's not a specific acknowledgement
Mhm.
of specific things you're doing, right? So you get maybe a broad thank you, like, wow, you guys are all great, but did they realize that I just stayed here till 8 p.m. because we had a concert, and then I had all of those different things, more of this specific acknowledgement of what the teachers are expected to do. It's very easy to say abroad, thank you guys, great job, but that specific feedback can be really helpful in communication. And when you have a large school, that's hard to do, but in a smaller Christian school, that can be doable. That can be to notice, like you said, I know what teachers are staying late, acknowledging, hey, I noticed you had a late night. Do you need anything? Like, are you good?
Yeah,
Blink twice if you need help.
because they're blinking multiple times.
Yeah. No, they're flat faced on their desk, sleeping. That's what they're doing.
Hmm.
It is an interesting. Uh, it's an interesting position in that um, you have those individuals who want to put in the time without the acknowledgement, while there's others who are a little bit more obvious that they do want the acknowledgement. I mean, I think of my parents who were very happy working behind the scenes and not getting the acknowledgement because that's not what they were doing it for. But at the same time, it's taxing, it's wearing, and for nobody to recognize it, it does drain the life out of you. And so you have that balance of being a selfless leader, minister, while also looking for that support that God gives us in the church and the Christian environment. So I guess what we need to start looking at now, and I'll ask you, Hope, what do you think with the results of your research? What are some ways we can use this information to help our Christian school leaders create more of a healthy work environment while continuing to uphold biblical principles and work ethic within their faculty?
Yeah, I mean, to foster a healthy work environment is there's a lot of things that go into that, right? Like I said, I think that acknowledgement, I mean, every Christian teacher, like you're doing it, I would hope for the right reasons, right? You're there to minister to the kids, that they would know the gospel and that they would know Jesus more and have Christian role models and learn. And, you know, most people are there for the right reasons. But it's good to know that it is making a difference, you know, that, okay, that affirmation of like, yes, keep doing what you're doing. Good job. I think as far as all of the working hours, I think it can get to a point where I know there are some schools where they're moving teachers around a lot,
Mhm.
or they're changing curriculums every 5 seconds, like my school. And you know, that adds, I mean, we noted that in the study, that adds a lot of extra work on teachers when you are moving grade levels, when you are changing curriculums and all of those types of things. So I think that's something to consider and not to do lightly. I mean, there are times when a curriculum change is overdue and needed. There are other times where, you know, we try it to just to try it, and that can be very frustrating, you know, and administrators may not, I mean, maybe they do, you know, they did overestimate how much work they do, but I think that's something to keep in mind to protect teachers and keep the morale high. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different pieces to that.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this idea of, you know, administrators, even just your presence, like you mentioned about, you know, walking in and saying, "Hey, saw that you were here late." I have found just being able to step in into the classroom after hours, just to be, "Hey, what are you working on? Anything I can do to help?" Just proximity tends to be a little bit of a boost in, or a shot in the arm for the teachers. But I think of the flip side too of whenever an administrator who is working really hard at keeping their faculty morale high, you're going to have the opposite effect where we're going to start getting to administrator burnout, which is going to be a topic for another day. But you know, there is that fine balance that, again, if you have discovered the secret formula of how to accomplish both things at the same time, you can be our
Yeah.
next person to interview.
Yeah.
So
And you're going to bottle it and sell it and make us all millionaires. Sponsor our podcast.
I think one thing like for with my administrator that I've talked with some of my coworkers about that of if they're going the extra mile, right? And I see my administrator is hardworking, right? They're putting in maybe a few extra hours too, like they're clearly trying, then that motivates me to say, okay, we're here working on this mission together. We are all working hard. You know, I think the problem comes when an administrator is, you know, maybe leaving a little early or leaking out on some of that stuff. When they don't go the extra mile, then it's hard to say, yeah, I'm going to go too. Then that resentment starts to build.
The only thing I would throw in past this, because you guys are hitting all the hot topics that I would, or all the keywords and whatnot that I would want to offer myself, but I have absolutely had times when the stark reality was I was going to lose a teacher, or I needed to tell a teacher to stop and to go home.
yeah.
I was getting calls from spouses, you know, things we don't want to happen. But there very much could be a time when an administrator has to step in, especially if they're that knowledgeable. If they are if they are estimating what they're estimating, if when push comes to shove and they have to think about it and say, man, I really do think that so and so's staying here longer than I want them to. Simply expressing that to the teacher is valuable. I have found to be valuable. If they know that my expectations, if they're exceeding my expectations for what the successful homer, you don't want to be the Holy Spirit, right? You don't want to make them less excellent than they think they could be if they did one more thing. At the same time, there very much could be coaching that needs to be done, because none of us came out of our undergraduate degrees in education, or, you know, walked into our first in the job knowing exactly what it was going to be like, and seeing that, oh, well, maybe what I thought I should be doing, I was setting the bar at 125%, and that's not realistic. Like, that's not going to, I'm not going to be an effective gospel witness ultimately, because I'm going to hurt my family, I'm going to hurt myself. So there absolutely could be times when we step in to say, we realign, we help to coach and perhaps realign understanding, or simply make the statement that no, like that's a school laptop and it's going to stay at school. And I'm going to need you to trust me on this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think another thing was the prioritizing, right? When I've been mentoring a couple different new staff members at our school, and they're working so late, and I just to tell them, I want you to think, what is the most important thing you need to do for tomorrow, and make it through that. I mean, the research was definitely showing that first, second, like those first year teachers, they put in a lot more work than others. And I think that's important to explain to first year teachers, that it's going to be okay. Like, you're going to get through that first year, and it's going to be a lot better the second, and then third will be even better. And then if we don't change curriculums, the fourth might even be better. So
Oh, retention. Hope, thank you so much. Is there anything else you would like to say or like to bring up before we say thank you and goodbye? You have been a true joy to share this podcast with, but anything else you'd like to say? You've given us much hope.
what can I say? It's in the name. I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, yeah, it's a complicated topic because there's not a great solution, but I think that was some of the motivation behind doing the project of, you can't solve a problem that you haven't identified. So,
Right.
Knowing that administrators, at least in this study, were aware of how much their teachers are working, is a good first step to say, okay, we know that this is a lot that's on their plate, right? And now we can figure out what are our next steps to get to a spot where there is a little bit more work-life balance, and that we don't have teachers burning out at age 27 and then losing teachers, because the teacher shortage is always a fun topic too.
Oh, we got to keep this focused on the minutia, small slice of the pie. We can't do it all right now. Yeah. All right, Hope, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and say goodbye, but we appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to pause the recording there. After we do this, could you guys all give me a wave so we can take a screenshot with a smile? All right, at that. Yeah, now you're frozen. Man, that was a lot of fun talking with Hope, having Matt be a listener as well as a host, keeping him between these two things. But we're going to go ahead and move along now to our administrator highlight. And our administrator highlight comes to us for the first time from the great state of Virginia. We got spotlight on Mr. Stuart Rogers. He's the Academy Principal at Keystone Christian Academy. Now, Matt, have you interacted with Stuart before?
Stuart and I have a history. Yeah.
I should have given you more than that.
Yeah, throw me on the spot. Why not?
Because I really don't have.
Yeah.
Matthew, in this edit, go back to where Matt said he has a history. My history with him actually goes back to our undergraduate, and then he came back into my life as a student at Maranatha. But he's been shoved in leadership. He's taken leadership there at Berryville, and it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, it goes back. I mean, we went to where Shorty's at all the time, Cape Rapidan.
Okay.
And we were like, I don't know, like 12 or something.
No way.
Yeah. So way back. But he's a graduate from Keystone, and returned to the ministry that he's a part of. So yeah, he's one of those. I
should have paused this. Too bad. I'm sorry, Matthew. All right, Matt. I'm gonna go back and shoot, Matthew, you're gonna hate me. I'm just gonna start this whole thing over again. No, I'm not. I'm gonna go back to where I said, Matt, do you know Stuart? And Matt's like, I sure have a history with him or something like that.
No, I might let's just say.
So what was your history? So how do you know him? I'll just say, so how do you know him?
No.
I'll say, so what is that history? All right, 3, 2. All right, so what is your history with the guy then?
Well, Mr. Stewart has, oh my goodness. This is going to be fun, Matthew. This is going to be great. My history with Stuart goes back to his alma mater of Keystone Christian Academy in Berryville. When I was young, had friends at that ministry. Stuart became one of those. But he grew up there, graduated from Keystone as well, and then returned to the ministry. So he's one
Oh,
of those.
he's one of
He's
those
one of those
guys.
guys, and
Nice.
filling
We love
in.
those guys.
Oh yeah, he is. He's filling the need of getting involved and helping that ministry progress. Has a heart for teenagers, has a heart for young kids. Even spending time with him at the Wilds on senior trips, the Wilds Christian Camp in Brevard, North Carolina. And the time that he has invested in the lives there with his students, we're thankful for the work that he has done at Keystone. I know he is a blessing to those he interacts with.
Absolutely. So I met Stuart when I was at Bob Jones University, and then Stuart actually came back to my life when Keystone Christian Academy became a part of the Maryland Association of Christian Schools Athletic Conference. And so I was doing work with them and seeing his school become part of that, and seeing how his school would do with the playoffs and whatnot. And then much like Hope, actually getting to interact with Stuart at the graduate level. And that has been awesome. So Stuart, we are so thankful for you and all that you are doing there they're in Berryville, which apparently is
Berryville,
extremely
Virginia.
close to West Virginia and somewhat close to Pennsylvania.
It's up
Seems
there.
like it's all around that same area. All right. And that being the case, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt now to talk about our sponsor.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
All right. It's time to come back in, and I'm going to start that one over.
Yep.
Because then it's not you.
Yep.
All right, Matt, I think we're done. Send us away.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Christian Principles Podcast. Don't forget to share this episode with fellow administrators. Make sure you are commenting on giving us your feedback and subscribing to our various channels where you can listen in.
Listen, if the teachers are bringing sleeping bags to school, you might want to think your workload policies, okay? But besides that, thanks for growing with us today.